My name is Kenneth Lukwagandason, your host. And today we'll be continuing to look at the quest for sustainable solid waste management in our country. Well, there was earlier today a dialogue bringing different stakeholders from urban authorities, civil society, but also parliament on why Uganda has stagnated as far as sustainable solid waste management is concerned. There were different views shared there. So this evening, I have stakeholders who attended that meeting to bring home or to bring here in the studio some of those issues that were discussed there and what has actually been agreed upon. How can we address the challenge of solid waste management in light of the Kitezi disaster that we had in this country, but also the fact that as we speak now, very many parts of this city still have pits and dumps of garbage, especially around markets, which remain uncollected. There are so many issues, including lack of adequate funding, lack of clear policy, lack of protection gear for the workers, among others. So in studio today, I already have two guests. Let me introduce the Honorable Dr. Byakatonda Abdulu, workers representative in Parliament. Good evening, and thank you much, Honorable, for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for hosting us tonight.
All right. Also in studio, Dr. Evelyn Akech, Sub-Regional Secretary, English-Speaking Africa at Public Services International. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, viewers, and thank you, Kenneth, for hosting us.
Well, we expected the Mayor of Kampala Central, His Worship Salim Uhuru, to join this discussion, but due to other engagements, he has informed us that he won't be able to make it. Nevertheless, we will hear from the two guests who are in studio to understand what exactly we need to do as a country to move forward. Do share with us using the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090, and the guests in studio will respond to you. Let me begin with you, Dr. Evelyn Akech. You are the convener of this meeting that happened today. First of all, if you can begin by giving us a background, why you called this meeting and what you intended to achieve, so that we can understand the kind of people who are there and the information that you've been able to gather.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kenneth. Now, Public Services International is a global trade union federation that brings together all public sector workers across the globe. Currently, we have members in 165 countries. And the public sector workers we focus on include waste, talk about water, energy, education, health, among others. Over the last 5 years, we decided to actually interrogate the issue of transparency in the supply chain within waste sector, energy, and also water. But also look further in terms of what is the quality of work, including terms and conditions of work for the workers within this sector. Because we appreciate that there's nobody who can deliver their vision, whether company, whether government, without the input of the workers, because they're the engines that really drive service delivery. Now, in the last 5 years, we were able to undertake a number of research, which we launched in 2022, but also do benchmarking within these three sectors. We were able to go to the generation in Alubale Dam. We also visited the National Water and Sewerage Corporation plant in Jinja, and also looked at a number of waste management in the country in selected municipalities, which included Jinja, Mbale, and also Namutumba as a local government. And we noted that there was similarities in terms of waste management. They are poorly managed. And it is quite interesting that in some of the dump sites, you'd find the medical waste mixed with domestic waste. And in some areas, you'd find actually that manufacturing companies would simply throw their waste over the fence where people are on the walkways. So we asked ourselves, what is the challenge? Because transparency means that we're able to look at who are the people involved in this sector, what policies are actually in place, the workers who are employed to undertake these services, what is their condition of work. And we noted, especially in the waste sector, whereas in water and energy sector, there's a lot of sanity. In the waste sector, there's no sanity. There's so many players, both local players and international players. But then there's no coherent approach in terms of waste management in this country. And sad enough, if you went through, let's talk about Nakasero Market, the times you'd actually find the vendors selling food products that you and me are going to take back to our children, sitting on the pile of waste and flies passing through it. And we'd already thought of having stakeholders engagement even before Chitezi landfill saga, which is quite unfortunate. And I want to send our condolences to the families that actually lost their beloved ones. And we wanted to ask ourselves, how do we better the waste management in the country? From the workers' perspective, they were able to actually identify that some of the key challenges in terms of why the waste in Uganda is not being managed. Number one is inadequate workers in that sector, especially as employed by both either KCCA, municipalities, or local government. But importantly, there was high labor turnover because most of these workers are being paid low amounts of money. They work odd hours, including women, who sometimes, you all know, if you're coming from Entebbe, at night, you'll find so many women around 2 a.m. sweeping those streets without security. And many of them are being subjected to gender-based violence, among others. At the same time, we also note that KCC was only able to collect 50% of the garbage. And we're asking ourselves, why hasn't this country taken a conscious decision to really have an integral approach when it comes to waste management in this country? The Chitezi landfill incident gave us that opportunity to bring all these stakeholders on board. And we said, look here, waste management is not a political issue. It is not politics. Waste management is people's life. And sometimes we forget, Lukwago, that today you might be in Radio 1. You don't know where your kid is going to be because times change. It might be your grandchild who is going to work in that waste management. It might be actually your uncle or your brother or your sister. And so ignoring the fate of the lives of people when it comes to waste management and in terms of politicking does not help anybody. So we said, okay, how do you bring all these stakeholders from the civil society who deals with climate issues and sustainability? We also looked at issues of the policy makers and especially the mayors. Just as you saw in the meeting, we had a number of representatives both from Entebbe, talk about Mukono, Wakiso, among others, including Kampala Central, but also the workers who are central and integral in terms of waste management. But then, just as I said, we have a number of sectors that are interlinked. That is waste, water, and then energy. So we also invited the water sector to be able to share the experiences. How has National Water been able to manage their sewerage waste? Because they have a facility in Bugolobi. And what lessons can we learn as a country in terms of managing waste without getting too much into politics? Because waste management is not about politics, it's about people's lives.
All right. Well, we're coming back to you to get deeper on some of the key things that came out from the different leaders that attended these meetings, and also the way forward, what you are really recommending that needs to be done. Why are we stagnating and how do we deal with that problem? But let's hear from the legislator. Honorable, you are one of the people also at that meeting, and you shared widely about what needs to be done, but also made commitments as members of parliament. First of all, when it comes to issues of solid waste management, is it a priority in parliament? Is this an issue that parliament is concerned about? And how is that commitment being reflected?
Thank you very much. I think I want to thank, first of all, Public Service International for the engagement. I think we realized the solution is within us, but people could not actually have an opportunity to come together. So this conversation yielded a number of results, which I feel as a legislator we need to take it off from there and ensure that we move. Commitment: 1, to reduce waste; 2, to recycle; 3, to compost, to ensure that at least we compost it. And then, of course, when we do this, it means we are reducing on the greenhouse house effect. And, it has a lot of associated challenges. And, of course, when you look at regulations like the NEMA Act and then the regulation, we are talking about how we really manage. But you realize that, yesterday I took an opportunity to move via some streams. And one of them was Ruviji stream. What you see moving is not actually water only now. It is carrying tons and tons of waste. So I think people have taken to them. I think this is the key, actually carrier of the waste that we generate. And we find that this pollution is has a number of effects on our health. and a number of other considerations. So the call to action is important, and leaders upon leaders spoke and realized they have the solutions, but I think the challenge is putting it together and ensuring that, one, they prioritize garbage collection. And of course, others have agreed that mindset is one of the biggest challenge. You find that when it rains, somebody doesn't actually think of disposing, but I think disposing in the mainstream, in the streams that are actually flowing downwards. And you find that these are carried throughout and taken actually to even key parts of the city. So that kind of attitude is not proper. The mindset issue is very important. And we have been we urged them. We are saying, why don't you really prioritize? Because like I told most of the entities, I'm on Park local government, and we have actually been handling a lot of issues. Because in doing oversight, in appropriation, we are looking at service delivery. So you cannot think of service delivery when you are living in such a filthy environment. We cannot talk of life expectancy when people are inhaling garbage. You cannot. Because when the key measure of the World Health Organization, when we talk of the health, we talk of the Human Development Index. In this, health is one of the core things. Education. We are talking about life expectancy. Talk of financial inclusion. So you cannot talk of financial inclusion when you cannot actually be healthy. It means all the money that any family, any household can get goes into ailments, treatment, medication, and yet we can sustainably handle this and ensure that. That's why you will hear why are Japanese having a higher life expectancy than Uganda. For us, we talk of a life expectancy of 65 for women and maybe 60 for males, but the others are talking about 85 and 81 respectively across the gender. So that means we need to do a lot to ensure that at least we promote health.
All right.
And when we handle the issue of waste management, it means a lot will be added, because a lot of ailments, a lot of diseases is transmitted through this. So we should now look at, because I think what we are, the call to action, we are telling especially cities, for example, KCCA, municipalities, and other cities to come up with a vibrant policy and ensure that we implement. The time is now. And of course, the question is, if you are budgeting, is the waste management one of the core aspects? Is it one of your priorities? If it's a priority, then take action, and actually we can realize, because it begins with us. I must assure you, in an economy where the communities are not well sensitized, where the communities not take action, we cannot actually have sustainable waste management.
All right.
Vis-a-vis the budgeting, and of course ensuring that we allocate. But of course, for us as legislators, we listen to their views, and we have already drafted a motion with colleagues which we want actually to table. But then we want to ensure that at least we leverage on the available mechanisms. You cannot talk of sustainable waste management when you cannot actually pay the people who are at the forefront. Who are the stakeholders? What are the policy gaps? So we realize that at least as it is, the policy gaps, for example, are not actually the key aspects of failure to handle waste management. But mindset, after what is it after all? However, the key stakeholders must actually identify it as one of the core aspects. If it is, then we can actually prioritize. Because what I must say, during the budget cycle, every entity is given an opportunity to budget. But I must tell you, none of them takes waste management as a priority. And yet, when we handle this, we shall be tackling a lot of health issues, shall be tackling the issues of economic, household gains, enhancements, and the like. Well, you know, the thing has actually become, it's not actually tameable. We need really to come up with an aggressive call to action and ensure that we start on this. When we do that, then we can actually have a sustainable waste management.
Right. Dr. Cage, gathering from your experience, having been in other cities around the world, but also gauging on what was actually spoken about in the meeting earlier today, why is Uganda stuck? What do we need to do to actually address sustainably the issues of solid waste management? Some people have been saying that, we need to deal away with landfills. At the moment, there's an ongoing pull here and there between cases here, political leaders and management over the purchase of land. We have heard about people who are offering to set up modern facilities, and actually we are told these people have been coming for quite some time, but we seem not to be moving. Why are we stuck?
Yeah, first of all, we must appreciate Lukwago is that we educated our citizens enough that waste management is their responsibility. And I think this argument of the government is responsible. Who is the government? Me and you is the government.
In the context of Uganda, the government is the person that collects the taxes from the citizen.
I want to disagree. A government is only a section of people who have been elected by us to be able to provide the services we cannot provide individually. And waste management is something that begins with you and me. I want to recall the submissions of the KCCA representative, which for me was a very valid argument. As the citizens of this country, we spend money to buy these products which we turn into the waste. But it's become so difficult for us to also engage in ensuring that we become part of the process, the solution of collecting this waste. So what is the biggest challenge? In other countries, what they've done is to undertake massive education for the population. And the population are willing to give fee for them to be able to manage their own waste, including being able to have that point of segregation, that we can actually do segregation at domestic level. That cities are able to provide, talk about the green basin, talk about the blue one, talk about the black one, further degradable one, plastic, etc. In Uganda, how much education have we undertaken for our citizens to be able to know that from the time I actually generate that waste, domestic waste, I should actually separate the food waste from the plastic waste. And then two, for instance, look at the waste we generate from the markets. If we had citizens who understand the value of organic manure, KCC would not even local authorities would not be picking that waste. In my home, I ensure that I segregate the domestic waste and especially the organic waste from the plastic. And I compose them and leave them in the boveras for almost 1 week and take them to my garden. I do not use fertilizers. I use the waste from my own kitchen. And that is what I'm saying, where is the problem? We've not taken time to make citizens appreciate waste is generated by me and I should be part of the solution. Number two, we say it is a government responsibility. How many of us are willing to actually pay a levy towards that waste collection? Let's look at even our landlords. How many of them actually provide even the basic requirements in terms of this waste management? Because sometimes I have this theory that all men will want accountability from everybody else except from themselves. The accountability starts with me as the waste generator. Then I can ask you, okay, Lukwago, I have done my part. I have sorted it, I've actually separated it. We're actually putting it in boveras that even when the waste pickers come, you're also protecting them. They're able to pick the kavera and put it in the lorry itself. But when you as Lukwago picks your food remnants and throw it along the roadside, whom do you take to be responsible? Then let's go back to the responsibility of the government. The government has got a responsibility of implementing the policies they've actually enacted. For instance, let's look at the Kavera ban, which was undertaken in 2009. All the other countries in the East Africa have actually implemented the ban, and it's quite effective. If you go to Rwanda, go to Tanzania, go to Kenya, the ambience actually changed the moment this law on banning those plastic bags, which are less than 30 micron, was actually effected. They're very clean. In Uganda, there's always lamentation and procrastination. The issue is that why are the policymakers not willing to ban the plastic use? And I'll ask just a simple question like I asked it. What are we afraid of that is making us not to implement the ban of the plastic? And which is actually, first of all, polluting our waters. And if you ask National Water and Sewerage, they spend a lot of money in terms of cleaning that water because of the plastic waste. And the same applies to Generation Company, which is our energy sector. So the challenge is both us as a citizen, but also as the government who has got the mechanisms for implementation. Because what they wanted, or somebody asked a question, if you're a policeman on the roadside and you see me throwing a bottle off through my vehicle, why don't you flag me down and call me to account? Because even the ones who are throwing, all of us, many of us who drive vehicles are the most indisciplined in this country. Somebody eats gonja or somebody eats chicken from Mavira and we throw those bones outside there. Then we say the government. Who is the government? Discipline begins with the individual, then it actually transcends to authority. But the key important issue here where we actually have a challenge is that as a citizen, we've not been educated to know that waste is actually gold. Remember what one man, the representative of National Water said? Waste is only waste when it is being wasted. Economies like Argentina, we have informal sector workers who have decided to turn that waste into energy, into fertilizer, and they're actually employing so many people without government intervention. It is an association of waste pickers, just like we have it in Ghana, where the waste pickers come together and they collect these waste, and they're employing themselves without government intervention. Government only provides that environment that is able to help them to work without interference. Because every time there's a lot of cash, then you also know that other people want to benefit from that.
All right.
So that becomes a challenge.
Well, Dr. Byakatonda, one of your commitments, like you earlier said, is to actually move a motion in the parliament.
Yes.
What do you want to achieve with this motion? Like you heard from Dr. Cage, you banned Kavera. Kavera is still around. It seems even the decisions you take as a house they are not respected. And this is an issue of leadership where people want to see action. She actually says, as a government, as people are in authority, you need to enforce some of these decisions that are being passed even by parliament.
Thank you very much. Actually, we see that the number of gaps, and we are not interested in lamentations. We want action. Of course, speaker upon speaker, I think they were saying the key issue is funding.
Funding.
So we are saying let's have a waste management fund prioritized as a government.
A waste management fund.
So we want the government to ensure that at least we look at that.
And do you want to propose how that fund will be, replenished? How do we get money?
Of course, it's already known. What is important is to ensure that at least it becomes a compliance issue. We must actually prioritize waste management, or that budget is not actually seen as compliant. I think this is very important. And then, of course, who are the key stakeholders? This is very important. We need really to look at this because there are a lot of commitments, there are a lot of regulations, a lot of policy, but of course implementation has been a challenge. So we want to call people to action to ensure that at least we take waste management as a serious matter. When we do that, it can be possible. And I'm sure the economies that have done this have already taken course and it's working out. If we don't, it's now or never, because it's almost running out of hand. Like I told you, pollution in the water, pollution everywhere. We're almost throwing it under our beds for failure to realize the importance of waste management control. So I think this is important, and we need really to set up guidelines. We must know what is this that we want. For example, you carry pills of matoke to the city, and yet those pills can actually be used as fertilizer back. But here they come and actually get mixed up with plastics and whatever. Then at the end of the day, you can. Is there a way, for example, we can have vessels and ensure that at least what we bring to town is what is consumable, and we reduce on the littering, we reduce on the garbage. This can actually help. Why is it that when we're exporting matoke abroad that most times we peel it and pack it? Can't we do that even as a country? So that we start, let's know a kilo of matoke is 500. Then you don't actually have to carry all the pills and everything to the city.
All right.
Yes.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Let's go for a break now. When we return, we'll continue looking at the proposals that were made at this meeting on how we can actually address some of the gaps that are existing. We have already heard from Honorable Dr. Byakatonda that they intend to move a motion in Parliament, and one of the things they'll be focusing on is introducing a solid waste management fund, which will ensure that there are timely resources in place. But there are people who are saying that it's not actually the problem of funding. It's a mindset, like Dr. Cage said, but also lack of proper planning. We'll be looking at all those issues as we continue reflecting on the need for sustainable mechanisms to ensure solid waste management in our country. Now, stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, but keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line 0703 0900. Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our topic of discussion today, we are looking at how we can ensure sustainable management of solid waste in our country in light of the challenges that we continue facing. You remember very well we lost up to 35 people because of the Kitezi disaster, which very many people say was avoidable. But as we speak now, there are piles of rubbish around the city because KCCA cannot actually find a place where to actually dump this rubbish. And I'm speaking to two guests in the studio, Honorable Dr. Byakatonda Abdul, Workers Representative in Parliament, Dr. Evelyn Akech, Sub-Regional Secretary, English-Speaking Africa at Public Services International. And this discussion is drawn from a meeting which took place earlier in Kampala, where these issues of solid waste management were discussed. This meeting brought together leaders from Kampala, neighboring districts, MPs and civil society, especially those that are working around solid waste management. Now, staying with you a little bit, Dr. Byakatonda, we have lessons from other countries.
Yes.
You people do benchmarking, go to our neighboring countries. We keep on talking about Rwanda. Now you've heard Dr. Kech talks about Nairobi, talks about Tanzania. Maybe even before I bring you on board, let's hear from Dr. Kech. What are they doing separately in Nairobi, for instance, differently in Nairobi that we are not doing here?
Now,
we don't need to go very far, because I've had people talking about Singapore. Let's look at the East African community itself.
Yeah, I want to set the example of what the practice in Nairobi. If I go to rent a house in Nairobi, one of the conditions I'm given as a tenant by the landlord is that I must pay certain fee for waste collection. And if I pay that money on a monthly basis, I am given 3 bags for separating my waste. So there's going to be domestic waste, there's going to be plastic, among others. So on a weekly basis, the waste companies that pick these wastes will actually come and pick these wastes. You've already segregated it. And it's actually a mandatory law that any landlord that is actually going to have tenants must ensure there's clear mechanism of collecting this waste and is actually being enforced. So you cannot enter into any house, whether it is within Kisumu itself, the big cities. You'll be able to be given those buveras, which are above 30 micron, for collecting your waste, but you segregate it at that level. It is just here. And it has become a law. Maybe that also goes back to, can we review the Landlord or Tenancy Act? What provisions are there? What is the responsibility, as one of the participants noted, what is the responsibility of the landlords? Lukwago, you give me a house tomorrow in Kisenyi. I rent it. There's not even toilet. There's not even a place for me to dispose my garbage. Where do you expect me to take it? Wait at night and throw it over? Because you as a landlord has not taken responsibility to provide for me means and mechanisms for collecting that waste.
All right. Now, Dr. Byakatonda, we've heard what is happening in other countries. What is it that we need to do to actually ensure that at least we have this kind of standards in our country? Do you still insist it's a policy gap? Is it a mindset issue? How do we move forward?
I think what I want to mention is that before you even go out of the country.
Maybe you can also share with us your experience elsewhere.
We have failed to build synergies. Because I think during presentation, we realized National Water has some mega plan where they're actually managing their their waste. And
the liquid waste.
Liquid waste, and we hear it has even turned into biogas and the like, and even generation of power. So likewise, I think we need to borrow a leaf from them.
Do we need an authority on solid waste management?
Not even
we should give the mandate to National Water.
We cannot have many authorities, but I think we need to do competence for filing and ensure that we cause leaders to action. Because if it is possible, why not? These compost manure things we taught right from primary. When you dig a pit and you put these biodegradable materials, they can compost and turn into manure. And we are an agricultural country. Yes. So why can't we really start by separating them? And you find everything is taken to Kitezi, whatever, all combine, and then this is how we have had problems. Then you find people are running around to pick. The thing is actually heaping. So I think the problem is that we are fond of being reactive, not proactive in our operations. But I want to mention, we want to ensure that at least we operationalize the law on waste management. There are a number of laws. If there are gaps, then we should actually get to understand what are the gaps. So that as Parliament we can look at ways of coming up with amendments so that we make a complete law that can actually help. So we need really to call stakeholders to action and starting with the entities. So what is important is to ensure that at least we have garbage management, waste management as a priority area. Because when we say prioritize, we are talking of education, we are talking of health, we are talking of road construction. Little do we know that waste management is another time bomb which can result into a number of challenges. So we need really to come up with a number of reforms in this.
And as we share experiences following the Kichezi incident, what do you think needs to be done? We've been using a system of landfills where we continue dumping. Even as we speak now, KCCA is looking for land where to dump. You heard from the other urban authorities, Entebbe, Mukono, they are all dumping. Is this a sustainable way of actually managing a solid waste?
Actually, in most of our scripts, in most of the agreements, most of the commitment, the protocols, there are 3 sustainable waste management proposals. 1, reducing waste. That's what I said. Waste should remain right at the source. You don't have to bring everything to Kampala or bring everything to the municipalities. Can't you really ensure that at least you process and bring at least what is due for the people? Leave the other things in the garden. But here you'll find that you bring everything. You carry the matoke. Matoke is actually about the food we eat is about about 25%. 75% is waste. Why do you carry everything? So we talk of reducing waste. 2, we talk of composting. 3, we talk of recycling. So the 3 key aspects are not actually addressed. You find that landfill is not actually one of the things we agreed on, even in the Paris Agreement. So you find that it's a issue where we have actually not been compliant in a number of aspects. So what we need to do is ensure that we do that. And for example, when we recycle, we are coming up with a number of other industrial materials, like for making garment. When we recycle, we are coming up with electricity. When we recycle, we are coming up with biogas. When we recycle, we are coming up with fertilizers or manure. So all this literally would even be adding value. That's why Dr. Ketch has told you from the other person that waste is only waste when it is wasted. So we can add value. Actually, we do see that people would even, for example, in recent times, when people started recycling the bottles and the caveras, you see that people are trying to pick it and go and sell. Those people are recycling. So we can do that. If there is, for example, we have set up somewhere for recycling and we are saying this is biodegradable for fertilizers, then people will pick it and bring it there. At the end of the day, we will find that we are reducing significantly on the waste in the cities and urban town.
All right, let's hear your view, Dr. Ketch, on this issue. The system we are using now of landfills, is it sustainable? Do we need to change it? And what do we need to do? What have you seen in other countries? What are they doing? How do they actually contain the situation?
Actually, the current issue of landfill is actually outdated. What most countries do, as you said, is issue of segregation. So if you went into developed countries, which I know we still have time to reach there, you'll find that at household level, they allow you to segregate. So you'll find a company which will come just for the domestic waste, which they go and use for fertilizers. Then they'll come for bottles and recyclable ones, okay, and use it for other products. Now, in Uganda, we can still be able to achieve this without necessarily going through the landfills. For instance, currently we adopted the competence-based curriculum, which really talks about students having projects. What will it take our secondary schools and universities in this country to partner with local government? For instance, Makere, which has got hostels, would partner with KCCA and including market vendors and get that organic waste, the domestic waste, and take it to their various schools. They put it in their pit for about 3 days, mix it with cow dung, and be able to produce energy not only for lighting but also for cooking. And at the same time use it for their garden to improve the food productivity and security within the various schools. It would actually make a lot of difference. And then we'll say, okay, the current curriculum which was adopted in terms of competence-based curriculum is producing critical thinkers, not simply people who consume knowledge without transforming it into something that can change this country. Now, we know there have been a number of initiatives. If you look at, there's a society, which is an NGO in Elgon, which is actually partnering with a number of schools to transform this organic waste into both energy, into issues of lighting, and also into issues of organic manure. But at the same time, we must appreciate Lukwago. If the country does not take a critical step in terms of turning this organic waste into energy, fuel, and also manure, we're going to continue having increase in climate change effects. Because the more we cut down our trees because we're looking for fuel for schools, you're looking for food for your schools, you're degrading the environment. So we have a very easy solution. Can the schools be the first starting point to be able to get some of these organic wastes and teach our students how to turn this organic waste into energy, into lighting, and also into issues of organic manure. And it is always easier to train a young mind compared to us, the old axe. There's an English saying that it's easier to train a new dog than an old what? An old dog. An old dog takes long to learn new tricks. But if the school system, which is the starting point in terms of transforming how people think and develop society, can actually adopt this approach of let's go and partner with both the local government, whether the vendors, we pick the organic waste just like Dr. Byakatunda said, and we decompose it at our own local levels. There'll be a lot of improvements and don't need the landfill, whether they want it or not, just like the Tezi saga. Every time you mix the waste, they'll actually decompose. And by the time we step on it, that is what will actually happen. The center cannot hold, because the waste is simply trying to do what it's supposed to do naturally, decompose and produce the methane, which ordinarily should have been transformed into energy. And what do you expect with the energy? If it is not contained well, it will actually explode. So we don't need the landfill. And let's go back to 2017 when Comrade Musisi was still there. There was a teaser which was released by KCC Authority together with IFC, which was calling for developers to develop the landfill, which is now in Mkono, the Dundu landfill. And that time they said they'd gotten over 100 acres. And the proposal, if you look, because this is public knowledge, was that the landfill was going to be in operation and commissioned by April 2019. How many years down the line? What happened to the teaser, which was actually looking for investors, whose work was actually to do all these things we're talking about?
Well, we are told the investors actually stepped forward, but there was lack of funding.
If you look at the teaser,
the government will only manage to provide 4.1 billion annually to, work on Kitezi.
Comrade Lukwaga, I want us to be honest, because this is a public knowledge. If you look at the teaser which was sent out in 2017, the investment was actually going to come from the money was going to come from investors. So
there was a call for application, and with that, funding was available. That's what you're saying.
No, normally if you send out call for application and you call you as an investor, you're the one who's going to invest your money.
Okay.
Because it is going to give
PPP.
you PPP. It was going to be public-private partnership. And that was actually sent out with the support of IFC, which is an arm of IMF. And that means any successful bidder was going to get funding. So it was not going to come necessarily from the government coffers. Even if the government was to come in, because it was a concession, it was going to operate as a concession, where the government could only come in maybe as a collateral for the loans which are going to be received. With the understanding that definitely was saying that currently waste is the new gold. Then the investors are going to be able to get back their money, but build Chitezi, because the vision then by Musisi was that Ndudu landfill was going to be one of the best examples in Africa on how to manage effectively the waste and also generate energy, which was going to feed into our mainstream energy pipeline. So the question is that what happened? And just as we're saying these things.
Apparently we heard from the political leadership in KCCA that there was a disagreement on how much the investor will be paid per kilowatt hour in terms of providing the electricity, because like you said, they will build, operate, and then transfer, which means they will need to recoup their money. But President Yoweri Museveni apparently rejected the amount of money. Is it 8 cents, 8 American cents per kilowatt hour? And he insisted that they would only be offering 5 cents, and the investors say it was not sustainable. There's so many investors interested, Dr. Byakatunda.
Yes.
And how do we entice them? How do we get them on board? How do we ensure that they actually invest? And from the meeting earlier today, we had even people complaining about corruption, how people are likely to be making deals out of this crisis that we have.
I think all we need is a transparent process to ensure that at least we assess people based on their competencies and then the pricing for the project. That's very important. But that notwithstanding, we first of all needed to enlist our support, our human resource. What are those competencies that we have? So that at least maybe we are looking at a PPP, public-private partnerships.
Can this be a Ugandan thing, or we need a foreigner to actually come in?
Well, of course, we don't mind if a Ugandan firm can come up with arrangements, because we are promoting Bubu. Be Ugandan, by Ugandan. Then, of course, we first of all exploit within our capacities. What do we have that we can do? We start with that, and then we'll look at other. For example, recently, when they took on UPDF to make our roads, I think I can see that they are making roads, and at lower costs. If KCCA has the staffing, what is that we can do to ensure that we enlist our local human resource?
All right.
And then we look at what's that we cannot do, so that we can actually maybe seek for the foreign investors to come around.
All right, it's that time when we get feedback from the listener. Thank you very much for sharing with us via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. So I'm going to read out some of the comments, and we'll expect responses from you. And I'll begin with this comment. Unfortunately, he didn't leave the name behind. He says, the Kitezi landfill crisis shows you how careless Africans are. You will see more of this in the near future. Then we have a comment coming in from Mawa Amaza, listening in from Moyo. Doctor, we can't implement that law because it will lead to loss of votes, especially in Uganda. Someone will say, stop disturbing my people, forgetting the long-term dangers like what has happened recently. That's a comment to you about, I think, the law on banning the Kavera below 30 microns. Benon Fred Twinama scored right in and said, the challenge most folks have experienced when they sort the garbage at home, they immediately find a KCCA collection point with one container. Then it gets worse when the truck collects garbage and the guys on it immediately mix it with what had been sorted. Then another comment comes in, please, solid garbage management starts at a family level. If we are to get it sustainably done, separation of waste at the level is what is missing, including at office levels. Let's do a sample run, even at government offices, and see. Check the backyards and see. I recommend we go that way. Then we have another comment. Hello, Kenneth. Thanks for the program. Dr. Akech is contradicting herself. There is no law-developed country that has ever developed just because of individual initiatives. Government must spearhead the management of waste. You can't note one of the problem as people not being sensitized and then call it an individual problem. We need proper laws. We need to fight corruption that is stopping investors in this sector. I know you have heard that some investors wanted to invest in this sector and were blocked. Our problem is leadership. Then somebody writes in and says, go back to the basics as a government policy and build a structure and build a culture of garbage management sustainably. We have another comment. The government can build a processing facility. This could reduce the importation of expired fertilizers, which are causing losses to our farmers. And it could also lead to more employment opportunities for the citizens. Then one last comment at this time. Waste, somebody asks, a caring government will only need to hire Dr. Kech and give us space. Waste can ably be managed by regulated private sector. Why does government want to do everything? Crowding out private sector? That is a comment coming in from Musinguzi in Kira municipality, who actually thinks, Dr. Kech, you can be the person to change the situation when it comes to waste management in our country. Let's get the responses. I'll begin with you, Dr. Byakatonda.
Thank you very much. I think I want to thank the listeners for the feedback. Negligence, yes, very true. We need to get out of our comfort zone and take on this mantle and address the issues of waste management. How that it will lead to loss of votes. I think votes are not everything, because for me, I started as an LOC1, but I know when we used those years in the early 1988, we used to have what we call the bylaws. You don't drink from this, but we could actually be revoted to office. I recall I was voted LOC1, LOC2, LOC3, but then we had LOC4. Then I also became youth chairman. So the vote's not everything. When you do better, people will actually understand. They will actually climb around, but then at the end of the day, they'll say, oh, this person was actually doing the right thing. So I want to implore authorities to come up with bylaws, which within the framework of laws that are available and regulations. So that at least, why would we really watch people throwing garbage everywhere? Actually, now it's now 7, coming to 8. This is the right time they are actually littering. Why don't we have bylaws? For example, if a place is being littered, why don't we actually put CCTV cameras so that we can actually see people are littering the place? When we do that, we can actually... Well,
we have CCTV cameras and people are littering. Nothing is being done.
Let's put at the very location. It can be a budget that we can put, and then at the end of the day, let's sensitize people. Let's have guidelines so that people can actually know. And of course, the issue of separation, where somebody, one container, this is very true. I've not seen 3 containers being put in a place. So if it's one container, what do you expect? People will actually bring all categories of.
At home, somebody will separate the garbage.
At the house,
it's being dumped.
When it's being dumped, there is one container.
One mix.
So I think the authorities need to handle this urgently. Leadership, very true. We need leaders who are very aggressive and who are keen to the issue and who have knowledge about this. Otherwise, what is this? They will tell you. I remember one time there was an election for Lord Mayor in Kampala. People were saying, when we bring in candidate X, that one will actually want us to plant flowers and do this. So it means that's an indication that the community are not aware of what are the dangers of waste management, dumping waste all over the place. The culture, very true. I think all the callers are very, very true to the fact that waste management is a very dangerous thing, and I would like to thank them for their submissions.
Right, Dr. Ketch, your take on the feedback from the listener.
So first of all, I want to appreciate all the listeners who are tuned in. I want to start with the issue of contradiction. All of us have agreed that waste management begins with me. So it is not a contradiction. No matter how much a policy can be good, but if we, the citizens, are not willing to be part of its implementation, then it becomes a challenge in terms of achieving what we want. For instance, if you look at the issues of waste, if we decide to do what all of us are saying, that it starts from family level, and if Lukwago, you refuse to keep on buying the Buvera of 100 shillings, where would the suppliers get the market to continue selling that type of product? So it also begins with us. We say government is all of us. And that is why I say there's no contradiction, because if I continue buying the same Boveras which were banned, I'm also part of the process. But if you knew it is actually becoming a problem as a country, and we took a conscious decision as the citizens themselves, then some of those factories will actually close because there are no demand. There's no demand for their supply. But then I also want to note as we conclude that it is also important that the workers who deal with this waste management in KCCA are given the required equipment to undertake this. Even if you gave me a truck without the different bins to separate the waste, my work as a worker is actually limited. I can only do as much as my employer provides me with. So the clarion call is that if we are able to involve these waste workers and improve their welfare in terms of decent work, in terms of security, in terms of providing protective gears like gloves, talk about boots, etc., they'll be able to enjoy this work as quality and decent work.
Talk about better pay or timely pay. The workers at KCCA were also complaining at that meeting. And we want to agree that the representative of KCCA admitted that there are 2 months which are still under contention. We know there's a time these workers were going for almost 6 months without them being paid. And Lukwago, these people are paid as less as 150,000. And this same 150,000 caters for your transport, caters for your school fees. And in one of the meetings, many of them actually noted that some of them were being thrown out of the house, and their kids are not were being sent out of the school because they could not afford to pay the school fees. Tell me how this worker will have a stable mind to come in the morning and do quality work, because we all go out there because we love our families, we want to provide for our families. So the clarion call for all the local governments, including KCCA, can we give these people their due payments? Even if it is little, let it come on time. But also appreciate that they're workers. You recall one of them saying they're not workers, they're cleaners. They're providing their services to be paid. So they're not cleaners. They're not only called cleaners to demean their status. They are actually workers who make this sector to run. And without them, we've always seen how much garbage is accumulated within the city itself. So involving the workers who understand the dynamics on how we can better manage these wastes, especially whether at the collection point, is going to be critical in terms of changing the face of the sector. All right, we have one last comment from Kayondo, who is listening in from Luampanga in Nakasongola district. She said, good evening, Kenneth and the panelists. The problem is far bigger than we all think. As a country, we are suffering from multiple organ failure. Every institution seems unprepared to strategically handle even a small disaster that is evidently knocking. You remember how Uganda suffered due to election violence in Kenya in 2007? We had no stocked fuel reserves, and government had given away its food storage facilities to a private investor. Up to now, if Kenya sneezes, we catch a severe cold. We are failed as a country to think ahead and are living just for the day. Uganda is riding a knee-jerk lane. I see more of Kitezi happening. We have a leadership and patriotism at the top of institutions. That is Kayondo listening in from Ruampanga. Thank you very much, dear panelists, for making time to join us this evening and contributing to this discussion. And thank you very much, dear Ugandans, for tuning in, and not only that, but also sharing your comments. You have indeed helped us to shape discussion here in studio. Well, I've been your host, Kenneth Lukwago Anderson.